Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the August 23rd meeting of the IoT Edge Working Group. This meeting is recorded. So if you would prefer to not be recorded, feel free to turn off your camera or hop off and watch the meeting afterwards. The working group abides by the CNCF Code of Conduct, which basically summarizes to be nice and respect people. With that being said, our agenda for the meeting is to take a final look and a revision of the Edge Native Application Design Paper, white paper, designs white paper, and also kind of continue to talk about the ways that we can promote it and get it out there with an eye on how KubeCon is coming up. So with that being said, all the folks that have been involved with that more closely are on the call. If one of you want to lead that discussion on how it would be most useful for us to take a look at it right now.
Hi, Kate. This is Brandon. I can queue up the discussion here. Looks like we've got Andy and Frank and Joel on as well. We've been developing this piece together. So as I go along, gentlemen, please feel free to jump in with any additions or corrections or insights. But let me just start by sort of laying the groundwork for where we are and what we're looking to do. Would it be okay if I share my screen?
Yeah, 1 second. I'll give you permissions. Okay, you should be good now.
Still no. Host disabled participant screen sharing.
How about now?
Now we're good. Thank you. Okay. So in the agenda for today, I included a few links for reference. There's the original draft of the principles, behaviors, white paper that we've reviewed a few times now on this call, and where we've been collecting and processing edits and feedback. We have a link to the instance on GitHub. And since our last call, we've took the step to start creating a clean version in Google Docs. Now, we don't want to create sort of the finalized PDF, I think, with the CNCF marketing team until we're ready with the final version. But that said, we wanted to clean it up, and we think it presents better for feedback. And our goal is to get the clean version into where we want it to be ahead of KubeCon. And this will be something that the team, my colleagues here who will be on site at KubeCon are looking to integrate into their conversations on the show floor, in the hallway track, and where possible with activities related to this working group in the various sessions that are happening as a point of discussion and collaboration for the community. So I'll briefly show the clean version first, so you can kind of just see our simplified layout. We cleaned it up a little bit in terms of the headers, sections, and spacing, font, etc., and updated the table of contents to try to make the things within the paper easier to find. So with that said, let's jump back to our working draft, which we used to create the clean version, and where we have been reviewing and processing the feedback that we've gotten in from this group on these calls and in between these calls, I'd say now over the last 3 or 4 months or so. Most of the feedback to date and sort of the pushback, if you were, has been around some of the language talking about storage, and how some of the ways in which we were describing storage sounded a little too prescriptive or like a mandate instead of a recommendation or a best practice or an outlook or something to consider. So where possible throughout the draft, we've changed the language to accommodate that general group of feedback, which was, like I said, usually the most prominent or pattern of feedback that we've gotten. Went into the doc today and saw, Kate, you've been in the doc here today as well. So I've glanced through your feedback and the things that you call out here in this doc, but that might be a good next step if we could, as we go along, hear what your feedback is, see about how we can incorporate that. And our goal with KubeCon coming up is kind of a forcing function. So we want to get this draft to where it needs to be for KubeCon, queue it up for discussion there, leave it open for a certain period for, the things, connections and conversations we're able to get going at KubeCon. And then it's something we can, I think, finalize into its next format ahead of the next event, which I believe is going to be KubeCon in Europe. And then perhaps with that additional runway, we can queue up some additional more formalized discussion points around these principles and maybe translate them into demos or workshops or other types of discussion at that event. So with that said, that's where we are. Let's go ahead and talk about your first point here, Kate, which was connecting back to our original white paper around the principles and maybe how you're not seeing a lot of those principles explicitly called out.
Yeah, and just for context, I haven't been as involved in the details of this writing, so I wanted to take a bird's eye view to see kind of what stood out to me. And obviously, it's an incredible paper for defining terminology and helping people get started building their applications. I feel like a lot of what it covers are questions that I've been asked over time of like, how do I get started? What are the concerns? And so, yeah, I think overall the paper is in a great shape. What I just pointed out some nits and some syntactical things. And one of the things that I did notice is that the paper starts by saying it's a continuation of the other paper, but isn't very referential to it. And that's not necessarily a problem, but it's just something that we might want to phrase their relationship differently. There are parts like at the bottom when we get to the actual design papers, it seems to pull in stuff from the 12-factor app, but then it also pulls in stuff that looks similar to the Edge native application principles. So maybe that's the point where it says this is where we have some connectivity to that previous paper. But I just think it would be helpful to kind of pull in how they're related or be explicit about it.
Yeah, that is a good point. And I think it's something we haven't touched on here recently. At first thought, I think we should change how we describe the two papers in correlation with each other. Maybe not set the expectation that it's kind of a one-to-one or built upon each one of the principles, as that wasn't our intent, but I think we could make that more clear. And then, in terms of how it is related and what we do want to say, that I think is worth discussion here with the team. I'm less familiar with the 12-factor app. I know that Frank and Andy and Joel were coming from that perspective when building this draft. So hearing that feedback, guys, what are your thoughts on any adjustments we might want to make in that regard?
Yeah, I think it's a fair assessment, Kate, to make mention of that. That there are new strides made in this paper, as well as some references to older ones and pre-existing. So I think, yeah, if we want to be more specific about where we're pulling in language from other documents and not saying it's a overall continuation, that's a possibility. I'll leave it to my colleagues though to comment on their point of view.
Yeah. Hey, just a general question. If that sentence was edited to state right where the cursor, my cursor, Just below that, where it says edge native application design builds on application principles, would that read better and address that concern, Kate, and the group, if it said edge native application design follows on to the principles with the focus, on design, just changing that setup? Because what you were stating is, hey, it reads that it builds on it, but it didn't jump out that it builds, but perhaps it does, follow on. Or change that word from builds to something different.
This sentence here, yeah.
Yeah, I think that sentence is one opportunity for it. It seems like to me, this sentence is talking about cloud native design. So a different comparison, and that the previous sentence is talking about the papers comparison. So wordsmithing might make sense here. If the purpose of the next sentence is to talk about cloud native application design, because it does that transition of now we're talking about the word design. We're not talking about the word principle, which I think is a helpful distinction to me.
I read the paragraph below first, so I apologize, Kate. I'm not in the doc, so I was off. I'm getting caught up live, so that's great.
I think there's a couple little things that could be done to make this sentence hold true. So to make the sentence of this supplemental paper shows how these principles can be translated into practice. In particular, the design behaviors do have some of the exact same principles as the Edge Native Application Principles white paper. So literally in the two that match, we could just say like, this principle inspires this design behavior because you need to design to resolve for its need. So for example, capability sensitive is almost synonymous to like resource aware, which we have in our Edge Native Application Principles. So we could just add a line there that says like, we know a principle of Edge applications is that you need to be resource aware. So a design behavior that you take because of that is build to be capability sensitive in X, Y, and Z way. And then their concurrency and scale is similar to spanning. So you could call out something there. But there's those two things could probably already help link them together a bit more.
No, we can definitely add those references. I think that makes a ton of sense. So let's go and make sure that we link those a little closer, and that we add references not only at the bottom, at the top, but also throughout the document where we say, well, this behavior links to that particular base principle that was identified in this other paper. We can definitely do that.
Yeah, and maybe couch it how some of these principles are translated into practice, because I don't think we've necessarily covered all of them in a one-to-one.
That's true. And then the original paper is also like, it provides for a load of categorization that we don't really do here, right? We're not trying to go and tackle every single category that was originally distilled in this application principles white paper. So it's not really that every design behavior has an associated category there. But let's go and see whether we can go and for these areas, Kate, that you identified, we can go and provide a link in that particular behavior that we described. And that way the linkage should become more obvious. We'll do that.
And I don't know if this is a call out to do this now, but if it is a call out to do it after this meeting, I'm happy to take a stab at doing that. I know y'all have taken a lot of time onto this. And put a
if
little,
you want to go and do that, that would be brilliant, right?
Okay, and so I'm happy to try and like do that. And yeah, have those changes in very soon. And then we can circle back to whether I kept with the tone that you all have been holding this whole time, because that's not, I want to make it consistent. And but I don't envision a lot of lines. I just envision a couple little things that I could add if that's helpful. And that seems aligned.
That would be excellent, right? Especially given that you have the background on how this original paper was created, which is something that I don't have. So yeah, let's see if you can go and put the right nuances in there. That would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah. If you could just put in your edits as suggesting or call it out in a comment so we could see what they are, that'd be great. We could then quickly review and approve and move on.
Honored to have your contribution.
Better together,
Thank
we
you.
say.
Sorry for the delay. But just to make sure, Brandon, do you want that in this one that I started commenting in, or in the clean version? Okay.
Yeah, let's keep it all the comments in this one. And then once we're happy with how it looks here, we'll go ahead and move that over to the clean one.
And that clean one, just to for everybody's understanding here, is Google Docs is not having a feature that allows you to go and apply a different template to an existing document. It just doesn't exist. So the best common practice is to go and create a new document with a new template and then copy paste everything across, which is unfortunate, but that's the situation that we're dealing with. Because otherwise I would have reapplied a more professional looking template to this document so that we can go and keep all the history that we have in this document. But that's just simply not possible, technically not possible by what Google Docs offers. Unfortunately, that's the reality. So which is why let's keep this one with all the history so that we have everybody's comments, how they were resolved, and all the tracking that we have in there. And then just for better presentation, we can go and then copy that across to the new document once we believe it's ready at working group level, and then we can go and socialize it a little further. And then we probably benefit from a template that looks a little nicer.
That sounds good to me. Kate, are there other comments that you would want to talk through here today?
And we can go and do these things immediately, right? So like reliable connectivity, we can go and fix all these nits. Okay, do you want to go and propose these as changes, or should I go and carry them across?
So some of them are to do with the diagram. So the reliable connectivity.
Yeah, I'll fix the diagrams. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And they were just suggestions. But yeah, we can scroll through them if we want right now. I'm trying to think if there was other ones. Once again, it was just a diagram comment. I found that like in our previous paper, a lot of our diagrams were the things that got updated the least because they were the hardest to kind of comment on. So I was just trying to call out some of those things because sometimes that's all that people look at when they look at the white paper. But I don't think I had really, the other thing, and this might go along with the comment that y'all had about data being the clear question of this paper, is I noticed that data constraints and security policy constraints sound synonymous. And I'm curious if we have a scenario where one doesn't fit the other, because data constraints quotes that it is security and policy constraints if you scroll up to the definition of it. So I was curious if we wanted to remove one of them.
Yeah, we can do that. Or we can just merge the text of the two.
Yeah, I was going to say just merge it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the question just becomes is which constraint word sounds more effective to people. I thought security policy constraints was pretty powerful because I think policy-driven data use is kind of novel or unphrased prior to me personally. So I thought that was very cool.
Yep.
Yeah, but the thing I think we need to go and make sure that we keep the word data in there.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, like, it could be where do you put a box or whatever, right? So I think we need to make sure that we keep the reference to its security for the data and its policy about the data. So if we add that one thing in there into that description, I think we're probably good.
Hey, question for me. Where would you put on the network constraints, for instance, instances where you need to establish at the edge security zones where you may have or network segregations? Is that security policies constraints or network constraints? Having to deploy an edge applications across zones that are not deployed in a DMZ and things like that.
Yeah, I would put that under the more generic policy constraints as being, because the attachment of network specifics is going to be, I mean, at least it's been in my experience, has been, regionality, sovereignty, and those things are things that we kind of work with at a higher level of abstraction that have to do with the inventory, right? So what's in inventory? What is the inventory associated with? What's a given location associated with? Which region? Which sovereign alignment? Which policy compliance might it have? Might it honor, et cetera, et cetera. So that to me would be an uber, like more of a meta policy discussion. Frank, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, makes sense.
Does that make sense, Milijan?
If I take an example of a power plant or something like this, you will have applications and resources or sensors that are in the far edge, very deep in the network, and you may have to transverse 2 or 3 gateways. In fact, you may not even have any routing available. Is that air gapped, or is that an area of the edge that we don't deploy at, and we just have to do it the traditional way with a USB stick?
Milijan, so I can get some context. Where are you representing a certain project, or is there a certain space that you know? Yeah.
I'm generally observing and listening in and been following a little bit the documentation. So networking at the edge is something that always feel is lacking.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think that this document doesn't really ascribe to an air gap situation necessarily, where there's no routing, no way to specifically steer traffic to that specific space. It's more general in its scope.
Okay.
At least that's my understanding of what are the general considerations and principles you should attempt to abide by to be consistent across the deployment of edge devices in a larger environment. So I don't know that air gap was necessarily addressed in this, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
Frank, did we address that in here?
Yeah, we do, right, to some extent, but I think I understand. Maybe I rephrase maybe on what you're saying slightly differently. Like, so there could be security and policy constraints that are related to data. Can I put data here or there based on like privacy considerations of the data or things like GDPR? But equally well, there could be constraints that are, again, policy constraints that are network policy constraints where certain connectivity between here and there must not happen, right? Or my data must never ever be moved via whatever, Northern Europe or Southern Africa, or, well, pick your poison, right? So there could be an aspect of policy constraints even in networking. Which is why I do believe that we might want to go and frame this slightly differently, like what we have from a bucketization perspective, that we talk about network constraints and associated policy. And then we talk about data constraints and associated policy and security, right? So that we take what we have under the policy and security domain and merge that both into the data part as well as into the networking part. If that could go and work out, because that would then also talk to how you set up your edge networks, whether you regionalize them, whether you provide for restrictions from, well, who can talk to who in your edge domain, which are communication policy and which are nothing about like the data at rest, which is largely, I think, what we are talking about in the data topic. It's like more like data in motion. That's the network piece, and the data at rest, I think, is the data topic. So I think we need to go and clarify that a little bit further, at least if I understand what you're saying correctly.
No, I think you're onto it. Yes, I think data in transit and the policies around it fits my question quite well. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe we can go and frame it accordingly, like that we talk about the network piece as kind of data in transit, and then the data at rest piece differently, and then merge that in. I think that, but it's like, this is why these reviews are super useful, right? That we make sure that everybody understands the bullets the same way, and that we further streamline them. So I really appreciate like you commented on it, and Kate, you go through the whole thing with slightly different lens. So that's good. Thanks for doing that. Yeah. So
to add,
scale and spanning is the same. So that's something that I, for instance, missed. That's cool.
Yeah, that was a word that we tried to come up with for the Edge Native Applications Principles paper, defined as the fact that applications on the edge don't often exist at one location, and rather they straddle multiple tiers, whether that's geographic tiers, or public-private, or offline tiers. So we try to use that word spanning, and so we can, when I go through this and try and add something, I can add that word and reference there.
Good catch.
Joel, were you saying something?
No, I'm good.
Okay. I think we mentioned this, tying in resource aware.
Yeah, my question here was the design behaviors. At the intro of the section, it mentioned how this was applying the 12-factor app to Edge native applications and their design behaviors. And so I was curious where capability sensitive came from or was inspired from, because I couldn't find it in 12-factor app. And so
well,
I was thinking
12-factor, Kate, is for cloud native, right? So you don't want to go design things to be capability sensitive. So it's the reverse of what you would typically do in cloud native. So 12-factor would be the wrong reference there. And well, I think this is very, very specific to Edge. So do we need another reference for that, so that it has an anchor somewhere, or because it's clearly, I think, goes beyond what 12-factor does, right? So that's why we're writing this paper.
Yeah, I think you made the exact call out that makes sense to me. There's a sign up there, a sentence up there when it's introing this section that says this paper considers the 12-factor methodology as reference for cloud native design. And that just clicked what you were saying. So essentially this section is saying, how can we use that methodology and look at it for Edge native? And then what are the other things that we need to pull in that aren't a part of that, that are specifically only for Edge? And so that line could be expanded to say this paper considers the 12-factor methodology as a reference for cloud native application design and the cloud native application principles for Edge native application principles, and have them reference or have them be one or referential to one or the other potentially. Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe Kate, you can go and propose some language for that. That'd be nice.
All right. I think that was it.
Yeah, that's it. And by the way, that there is one important thing, and I want to go and call out here again. We had a load of, if you go to the blue section, yeah, exactly that draft thing. Everything below that bar, in that paper here, there's a load of things that are like maybe semi-baked, maybe not baked at all. Like people saying, well, we need more examples, but they didn't really give any examples. So this is pretty much a dump ground right now, and that will disappear if we do the cleanup version. Right, so anything below that line is pretty much like, yeah, well,
we're holding off on including it in this version. Yeah.
So that pretty much goes. And because this is not done in any shape or form or ready or like or either overly specific or what have you, right? And
okay,
then
so we'll leave it in there for background.
Yeah, I think we said that multiple times, Brendan, right? When we were trying to go and inspire people to go and actually contribute if they care. And I think for at least like 6 weeks or 8 weeks, we've not really seen any refinement of any of those things. So, well, if somebody wants to go and refine them, then it's probably like for the next version of the thing.
Fair enough. Yeah, I would agree with the sentiment that if they're not fully baked ideas, that we leave them out for now for brevity and simplicity and completeness.
Okay, and I think that's pretty much what we have so far. So, Kate, by when do you feel like you would be able to go and take a stab at that?
Yeah, I can get the changes that for referencing the previous paper and by end of week. And I'll probably do that after this actually while it's fresh of mind. That's a good transition. Maybe we can talk about timelines for publishing this for CNCF. One of the preliminary steps we took last time was to create a pull request into the runtime tag GitHub with the paper. So then the marketing team with CNCF had that to look at. And then I believe the prettier version, Brandon, if I remember correctly. So if that's the next step, when do we feel like we want to create that pull request in there? Would that be end of next week? Is that too ambitious? Should we wait?
Yeah, I think the question is,
if you're sorry, Brandon, but Kate, if your stuff is in by end of week, I can go and take a stab Monday next week to go and well, maybe do the final additions that we just discussed, or I can do that in parallel to what you're doing, so that we should have a version early next week. So end of next week, I think we should be totally fine.
Kate, just a question of process on CNCF. Is there like a do not merge or a do not review tag that can be applied? If we were to open the PR sooner and then still have revisions?
Yeah, there should be. I'll check that now. And if not, I can ask them to create one. I'll check.
Just use a draft PR.
Oh, yeah, right, draft. So Frank, we could do that, you know, at your own time frame and then just do another commit when we get updates.
So we need to go and convert to Markdown. That's what I'm hearing.
I don't think you do, right? You just include the document as an artifact, right?
That good enough?
What's the preferred way to insert it, Kate?
Because I don't want to go and do that conversion to Markdown, to be honest.
No.
Yeah, it is a bit of a headache. We did do Markdown last time as the conversion form. And we could link a docs file instead, or directly link a PDF. The Markdown is helpful where people want to suggest changes, is what we were thinking in the past. So if someone wanted to put a pull request into that, because they're more familiar with the GitHub form. But it is a bit of an annoying conversion. So maybe we wait to do it until we're positive that the final draft is the final one.
Okay.
Hey, Kate, last time you and I did that conversion, currently we have an issue on the tag runtime in GitHub. Can we simply track this within that issue that Andy opened and I think Frank contributed to? Just do that tracking within that to point to the clean version. In other words, this clean version that Frank put together and the team has now, I believe is that's an easier way than doing that conversion. But simply put, can we track it in the issue as opposed to putting it into Markdown at this point?
So essentially, don't pull request or merge into the runtime tag any paper of itself, but rather in the issue once it's published and we have some CNCF paper, just link it to that issue and close the issue with that link, essentially.
Yeah, I'm just, perhaps it's just perpetuating a transition to Markdown, or can you put a final PDF into GitHub? In other words, we track it, and then when we send it to CNCF for the final, we can upload the PDF within GitHub as opposed to having to do that transition. So in other words, track within the issue, and then when it's finalized, upload the final so it's in GitHub. Did that make sense?
Yeah, that sounds like a great approach to me. And now that I'm remembering, I think the reason we put it in GitHub in the first place was because we didn't have the published paper, like the CNCF published paper yet, and we wanted a link to point people to.
Mm-hmm.
So especially depending on the timeline for that, it becomes less important that it's in the GitHub repository, and certainly a PDF is perfectly good as well. So yeah, just uploading PDF sounds, I'm good with that. I don't know if other folks have preference towards Markdown as well.
So as we think about promotion at KubeCon, just want to confirm that it's our desire now, if we think we're going to be finalizing this draft for now here shortly, to get this into the CNCF marketing workflows and try to get a PDF ready before KubeCon, which is going to be in November 6th through 9th. I believe that gives us enough time to do that. And following what happened last time, what also happens is they add it as a resource from the CNCF website, and we're allowed to craft a blog post introducing the paper, and then it also gets picked up in some of their regular promotions like Cube Weekly. So is that our desire to do that ahead of KubeCon, to continue, to point to that and continue the discussion there? The other option would be to just use this cleaned up version we have for now, considering it a bit more of a draft, waiting till after KubeCon, and then maybe producing this designed PDF sometime early next year and talking about it more forcefully upon the publication of that PDF. Between those two options, what do we feel might make more sense for the group? How do we get more value and more attention to the effort?
Yeah, Brendan, I think the discussion that we had the other day between UI and Andy and Joel was like, maybe it's worthwhile to go and do a two-step approach, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where we try to go and present this as a stable draft
Mm-hmm.
by the working group, and then open up for comments. Hopefully we might get one or the other guy to go and review it post KubeCon, and then we do another revision to go and create a final version. That way,
Yeah.
it might be a little bit, say, yeah, well, as I said earlier on, like, the more eyeballs on it, well, the better it will get, right?
My only thought with that would be, we did that approach for the first paper and got no community feedback on it. I think people enjoyed the paper. I think it was new information, and people are kind of starved for design and behavior principles on the edge. There's not a lot of information out there. So my assumption would be that people are going to find a lot of it useful. They might find that their niche of the edge isn't as fulfilled as they would like, and maybe we would get that feedback, but we can always publish revisions, which is what the perspective we took with the previous paper. So if this has been a project for a while, I think it's had a lot of discourse. I would think going for it and trying to publish it would be a good option. The other thing, because I know we wanted an opportunity to speak about it beyond mentioning it at Edge Day in the closing remarks, we could also, Brandon, when we reach out to the marketing folks, ask if we could get a CNCF webinar on it. So oftentimes they'll let like working groups and projects do webinars. And so I think that would be a really cool follow-up if also we had a webinar scheduled for, say, 2 weeks after KubeCon, so that at Edge Day, it's like, hey, this is our paper. Also, we're going to have a webinar where we're going to talk through kind of this prevailing example we have in the document, for example, one topic that it could be, or a demo applying these, whatever, to kind of bring people in to get an audience there. And then maybe there we ask them for feedback, but yeah, even having a session devoted to the paper last KubeCon, we didn't get feedback. So I'm hesitant to think we will.
Okay,
That's
then
a great
let's
idea.
go and
Forgot
publish.
about the
That's good
webinar
feedback,
series.
right?
Yeah.
Let's go and publish. And maybe I've not really seen, like, when are approvals for session proposals coming out for KubeCon? Because Andy and I, we put a proposal or even two in to go and talk through these design behaviors.
Next Monday, the
28th.
Yeah, so we might even have something there. Not sure. And then it would be indeed good if we had a published version of the whole thing.
Yeah,
So
and the
let's go for the
webinar is a
published
great
version.
idea. I get these emails all the time, and I attend those that I'm interested in. So, and there's usually a pretty good crowd on them. So that's a great idea.
Yeah. So Kate made us change our minds, right? Brandon, Andy, Joel. Let's go for publishing.
Yep.
Yeah, I have to agree with Kate with, the way it went last time, publishing. And then either it's a webinar or you do the proposal at Europe in the spring.
Okay, I'll take the action to reach out to that group, let them know it's coming as soon as next week, and see if we can't get it produced and published by November 6th.
And then Brandon, in that call out, do you think they would know how to take the action steps on the webinar, or would you like me to inquire about that?
I think you might get a better result if it came from you as the chair of this group in this effort.
Okay, yeah, feel free to CC me on the emails, and then we have some folks on our team that work closely with CNCF, so I can ask them what that process is for webinar as well. If not, reply all to whatever email thread you start.
Okay, sounds good. That's a good idea about the webinar. We should see what we should do there. Okay. Anything else about this topic?
If
Okay.
we feel like we finalized on this, we have about 12 minutes left. Some potential topics could be discussing if we want a IoT Edge working group kind of in-person meetup at KubeCon, if we would like something along those lines. We can discuss that. Another topic to discuss would maybe be what we would like to look at and focus on beyond the white paper in the coming months. And if there are certain initiatives that we feel like we want to lean into a little bit more.
I have posted a link. It come from the RF Edge taxonomies, projects, etc. So I think it'll be interesting because because edge computing is talked a lot, right? It's getting popular. Last week there was discussion that the presentation about WebAssembly. I know the WebAssembly team is there's also working on the WebAssembly landscape per se. So there's a lot of products involved. But Edge obviously is kind of overlapping with WebAssembly, but not completely WebAssembly. So I think it would be nice if there is sort of like that. Doesn't have to be. It can be just a simple table grouping of different products into categories without giving as much detail. This way, when someone tell, okay, edge computing is hot, right? So I get in there, I can see, okay, this is the product involved in in edge computing, and I can do my own research, go into details and see pick which one. Yeah, there's a lot of things like operator, for example, operator pattern. It's kind of overused. That's why I find a paper about KCP. KCP is very interesting. And then from there, I know KCP kubestella now is very interesting for Edge as well, right? So yeah, all that information to be grouped into whether it's a white paper or just a blog or whatever, or just a document for reference.
Yeah, Victor, it sounds like what you're pointing out is there's WebAssembly landscape. Why isn't there an Edge landscape? Is that a fair?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can summary like that. Yeah.
So that's something that we've talked to the runtime folks about, and they seemed interested in the idea. So we, after our last white paper, created an Excel doc with a list of projects and tried to start categorizing them. And we didn't keep it to just CNCF just because we were interested. So a lot of those LF Edge projects are within that Excel document, and that's something that we did share with the runtime folks. But this is a call out of maybe that's something we want to push harder in the next coming months, is get that edge landscape put together.
Yeah, I think that'd be very good because the RF Edge is very interesting, but it's more catered to the infrastructure provider, telecom provider landscape. Whereas I think CNCF, this group probably should be focusing on the actual end user, mostly end user when it comes to edge computing.
Well, I can take, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, just to be clear on terms, when you talk about the landscape, are you talking about the tool within CNCF and other Linux Foundation umbrella communities that show, the projects, the companies, the categories, the overlapping areas of work and interest. The CNCF one is massive, but smaller ones like LF Edge also have a quote unquote landscape that's visible on the web. Is that a place where we could kind of document what you're proposing?
Yeah, it's mainly if I'm new to edge computing, my company or my organization, what options do I have to build such an edge computing product or solution?
Okay, so there's the glossary of projects that we've started in this group that could potentially expand or connect to some of this additional information. And then just for reference, I'll put in a link to the LF Edge landscape, which I don't think's been updated in a while, but like the CNCF landscape, the team at Linux Foundation has the ability to update this document or this it's like a living, breathing app, online app to reflect kind of the current evolution of what's important in a landscape view of the project.
Say probably the more similar white paper is actually the CNCF app delivery tax, the platform white paper, which listed there's a table in that paper that listed the products grouped by category. So yeah, it doesn't, because the landscape, to make it look nice and a graphic is pretty hard, but it just needs to be probably just a table group categorized into categories. That'll be enough.
Yeah, Victor, this is something that we batted around a bit internally, just to give you an idea. There was a chart that there was a table that we were thinking about proposing that would have the constraints in there as a cross section of the tiers where they overlapped. And I think what you're suggesting here is interesting because the potential is there that you could take the constraints and overlap them or cross sectionalize them with projects that are out there that are in the CNCF that actually address or in part or in full.
It doesn't has to be only runtime. It can be anything edge,
right?
Because runtime is only part of that solution.
I think what you'd have to index on in a descending order would be the weight of the edge, on a capability, matrix like CPU architecture or something like that. So you could start with, like x86, ARM64, ARM32, and then STM32 or STM8, scroll down that way, and then map, what could be deployed there across those edges. That would make sense, because I think we end up falling into the same trap that we've circled on in this meeting a few times, which is when you say edge, what do you mean, right? People hear their own reality around low power or full PCs or iPhone or Android or whatever.
I think that definitely, because edge is one area that definition. There's so many definitions. There's not even agreement sometimes on the definitions. So I think that makes it interesting to go over how to abstract it to be useful. It doesn't have to be universally agreed upon, but to be useful for people to use that taxonomy to really decide on what solution or at least the products can be used to build their own solutions.
Yeah, I think we get into an issue here with scope. Like, for example, with the WebAssembly landscape, it's fairly clear. It's like, are you running WebAssembly components here or modules here? With Edge, like, does Istio fit on the landscape? Because it has certain networking considerations for the Edge. Like, anything networking in CNCF probably could weasel their way into the term Edge. So having a landscape would be tricky to find the scope or the list to define what do we exclude. We're going to have to be very particular in order for it to be useful, and not just be overwhelming to people.
That's why I think it's useful, because even, with this expert on this slide, I'm new to this, so I think you're more expert than this. So even you, when you talk about it, find it kind of overwhelming on, how to categorize it and how to define it. You can imagine for a new person who in edge computing, this is even more overwhelming. So I think any information that can be provided in a streamlined, table format or a blog or white paper will be helpful.
Good suggestion.
Yeah, I think I would agree. But the problem is that putting that table together without really adding color to it is very difficult, because per what you're saying, right? So Edge is not necessarily understood the same way as, same thing goes for categorization and how you would go and qualify certain projects. And that makes it pretty difficult to go and come up with a decent landscape overview. That would not then quickly grow into anything as Edge.
Yeah, I think the trouble is also the number of permutations, right? Is how many projects touch on any one given area, and then the potential for excluding somebody and not being as comprehensive as you should be, right? Or as somebody perceives you to be. Yeah. Yeah,
reference that platform white paper. If you go to the platform white paper, go to the bottom of it. It has a table. There are for any area of technology, there's a lot of players. But I think as long as it's open source, especially part of a CNCF, then it can be included. Even if it's not I think if there's debate whether it should be included, why not just include it, right? Because if you scroll down all the way to the bottom of this paper, all the way almost to the end.
Yeah, but this is where the problem starts, right? So do you only going to go and include CNCF, then you're excluding LF Edge, which doesn't make sense. Are you going restricting it to LF Edge? Then yeah, well, again, it's a constraint. So you're immediately caught by operational boundaries that most people don't care about, and then it's an in and out discussion, and so you quickly end up basically including everything. Then suddenly Kafka is an Edge project, right? So that makes it so difficult. I would appreciate the effort, but getting it done is difficult.
I think that I agree, and that's actually also the reason to make it more even useful, right? So because again, for newbies, even harder to even imagine how to pick products.
Yep, yeah, absolutely. Well, everybody's lost in this domain, but as soon as you come up with some representation, then you come up with opinionated choices, which is not great in open source.
It's super hard, Frank, I think you highlighted an awesome point, which is membership in the foundation or not. And if you look at the WebAssembly landscape, for example, we actually have, it's Wild West. There's full on CNCF stuff like Wasm Cloud, but we made that decision when we discussed it based on the maturity of the ecosystem. WebAssembly is a new ecosystem. So what we felt like we had to really differentiate was, here's everything for discoverability, just to